So after a couple of years of planting, growing, harvesting, and curing garlic on this channel, a couple weeks ago we finally showed you one of the ways we actually use garlic, in the form of garlic salt. And we were really glad to see that many of you found that helpful, or at least interesting. But a few of you had concerns about the type of salt that we recommended. For starters, some mentioned that while pink Himalayan salt is more natural and contains far more trace minerals, not all of those minerals are necessarily desirable for everyone. And others rightly pointed out that while we can easily purchase this gourmet salt in our local grocery store, it first had to be shipped there from, in our case, halfway across the globe. And finally, some people just prefer their garlic a little less salty. So whether for reasons of taste, health, environment, or just plain old curiosity, either way, we've got you covered. Because in this video, we're going to cut out the salt completely and show you how we make garlic powder. Now, if you're short on time, the process for making garlic powder is essentially the same as the process for making garlic salt, just, well, minus the salt. But if you've got a few minutes, we do throw in a couple extra tips as well, so this video is still worth watching. Okay, let's get started. The ingredients list is pretty simple, because all you need is garlic, and lots of it. You see, garlic shrinks quite a bit during the drying process. For example, we typically find that 1 cup of fresh garlic cloves makes about 1/3 of a cup of dried garlic powder. So the more the merrier. Once again, the first step is to break apart the bulbs and then begin peeling the cloves. However, because we need so much more garlic this time, the smash it with a knife method just isn't gonna cut it. Instead, we recommend dumping all of the garlic into a large pot, covering it with a tight-fitting lid, and then shaking the crap out of it for about 30 seconds. Not only is this a surprisingly effective upper body workout, but it also does a decent job of separating the cloves from the peels. Next, we like to trim the root ends, but again, this is probably not necessary, so it's up to you. Alright, now that our garlic cloves are peeled and trimmed, the next step is to prepare them for the drying process. Technically, you could probably just toss them straight into a dehydrator, and it would most likely work, but it would also take forever. So in order to speed things up, it's best to first cut the cloves into smaller pieces. That increases the surface area and provides the moisture with an easier escape. Think of it like trying to dry out a wet cloth that's laid flat versus one that's all balled up. The flat one would obviously dry much quicker, and the same goes for the garlic as well. So most people recommend thinly slicing your cloves using a knife, a garlic press, or a mandolin. However, we found that simply chopping the garlic all at once in a food processor is both faster and easier and seems to be just as effective for dehydrating. But your results may vary, so it's probably a good idea to experiment with both if you plan on doing this often. Either way, once the garlic is fully processed, now we have to decide how we plan to dehydrate it. And for that, we've got 3 primary options: an oven, a dehydrator, or the open air. Now, each have their pros and cons, but it mostly boils down to speed and temperature. In our experience, the oven takes a few hours, hanging takes a few days, and the dehydrator falls somewhere in between. Of course, all this depends on how dry your garlic is to begin with, and the humidity of your house, so again, your results may vary. But we've found that our personal preference is to use a dehydrator, and there's 2 reasons for this. First of all, a dehydrator typically allows you to dry the garlic at a much lower temperature than an oven does. For example, our oven only goes down to 170 degrees Fahrenheit. And while that's good enough for the quick-drying garlic salt, the slower-drying garlic powder can brown slightly, making it a bit on the bitter side. But we don't really mind that altered flavor all that much, so let's move on to the second reason for preferring a dehydrator, which is garlic smell. Because here's the thing, drying garlic in your oven for several hours is a surefire way to smell up your entire house. So if you're going to use your oven, make sure you turn on the exhaust fan and choose a day when you won't be expecting company. But does a dehydrator produce less smell? No. But it is portable, which means that rather than smelling up your whole home, you can instead set it up in the garage or a tool shed, just as long as it's protected from any courageous critters with a culinary curiosity. But whichever option you prefer, the next step is to spread the garlic out in a thin layer on a parchment-lined oven sheet or a dehydrator tray, and then turn it on. As I mentioned, the drying time can vary quite a bit. But as a good rule of thumb, we set our oven to 170 degrees Fahrenheit and check it every 30 minutes. Or set our dehydrator to 115 degrees Fahrenheit and check it every couple of hours. In the meantime, you can wash and dry the food processor so that it's ready for the final step. You'll know the garlic's done when it becomes hard and dry. And at that point, you can remove it from your appliance of choice and let it cool. Then finally, toss the cooled garlic back into the food processor and chop it until it reaches your desired consistency. But here's a pro tip. If you like really fine garlic powder, then you may have better results in a high-speed blender or a spice grinder instead. Or if you're living off-grid or just want to continue that upper body workout, you could even use a mortar and pestle for this. That's by far the most hardcore option, but it also takes a lot longer, so it's up to you. But once you're happy with it, just pour the powder into an airtight jar and store it someplace cool and dry. And that's it. Now you'll always have homegrown garlic on hand whenever a recipe calls for it. But in the meantime, thanks for watching, and see you soon.